Good morning to everyone who's joining us in the US, and good afternoon to everyone that's joining us in the UK. I hope you're all healthy and well. The reason why we've sort of decided to pull this webinar together is because our purpose as a company is to make buying without humans feel human. And that purpose has really come into its own, I guess, in the last week or two. What we're seeing is that the human interaction is becoming a sort of luxury item, and something which you're all dealing with is the reality. The reality of that. What we want to do is we want to help. We want to provide a voice in this. We want to try and see if our data can help you, make a bit more sense of what's going on. One of the interesting things for us is that our data is unique in the sense that it's having a conversation that which we're trying to make buying without humans feel human. And to do that, you're trying to replicate that craft. And the result of that approach is that you get quite an interesting view of not just purchases and uniques and all the stuff you'll be seeing, but the kind of why, the reasons behind people's decisions, the changes in their needs, the changes in their behavior. And that's what we want to try and share to see if that can be of help. So just quickly then, what we're going to be covering. So we're going to be trying to answer 3 real questions for you in the next sort of 25 minutes. So the first one is how the digital mix is changing. So obviously you're going to be seeing that. You're going to be seeing your own data that tells you what's happening in terms of traffic and conversion. But what we want to do is give you an industry view. So one of the key things is that we are telco specialists. We work pretty much completely within the telco space. So this is trying to give you just a sense of what's happening across the industry. So you get a better understanding and benchmark against what you're seeing. We also want to look at, and this is where the data gets quite unique to us, is the needs and how they're changing. So what we're seeing in these conversations, what are we seeing in terms of how people are making decisions now versus what they were doing before this all happened? And how do you need to respond to that? We're also going to be looking at the buying behaviors of customers. And again, you will obviously be seeing high level that buying pattern behavior changing on your site. But we want to give you both a sort of view of that across the industry, but also we're spotting some interesting buying behaviors within the engine itself, which we think can be useful. And then for the final part, we're going to be looking at how we can help. So we want to be in a position where we can support as much as we can over these months. And based on the data and what we found out, we're going to be looking at how we can help. So just a quick one on where this data is coming from. So first of all, a quick timeline view of the sort of rapid change that we've obviously all been seeing and living through over the last few weeks. So we split this by UK and US, and obviously things happened at slightly different times, even within the US, because it's state decision making. Things were happening at different times. But what we've done is we've tried to group it into kind of 4 key sections or four key periods, which range from business as usual, very little advice being given sort of before pre-March 11th, through to the initial, so the pandemic being announced, and then the initial kind of behavioral shifts happening in society, right the way through to this sort of last period, which is kind of from the 23rd of March, which we've kind of called the full lockdown period. Now, in the UK, that was full lockdown. In the US, it wasn't. So on the 23rd, 1 in 3 were asked to stay. So state-wise, 23rd, 9 states were in lockdown. By the 26th, there was 21 states in lockdown. And by the 30th, there were 30 states in lockdown. So that week actually was such a key week across all geographies. So that's the bit we're going to be honing in on. It's that last bit where this data is really coming from when we use it as a comparison. And then in terms of the sort of data we're using, so we've had 1.6 million customer interactions across telco over the last few weeks that we've baked into this research. So quite a good spread in terms of the volume coming into this that we can use. And then in terms of the actual range, we've used 7 tier 1 global telcos in this research covering UK and US. So when we say the industry, we're talking across 7 tier one telcos as we do that. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to hand you over to Emily. Emily is one of our senior analysts, and her team have been pulling this data together. So Emily's going to walk you through this, and I'm going to jump in and commentate a little bit as we go through. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. So firstly, I want to talk to you about how the digital mix is changing. The first trend that we want to share with everyone is that despite store closures, there's actually fewer people browsing on telco industry websites than there was last month. We've seen a 15% decline since the end of February. And contrastingly to that, we've actually seen sales increase quite rapidly. So we've seen an 87% increase in sales since the end of February. And what we've really understood that as is that we've seen fewer people browsing. There's been quite a large drop off around kind of weekday lunch times and before work, where people previously might have had a bit of downtime to look at different purchases or kind of research. But now their routines become disrupted. They don't really have that opportunity anymore. But the individuals that are motivated to purchase are still making it onto the sites.
Yeah, and I guess worth mentioning on this one, this was something we were fascinated by, because obviously everything tells you that this shouldn't happen. The retail stores are closing, the traffic must go up. And I think it is, as Emily said, partly down to this, the people that aren't ready to buy phones right now, but are just browsing, the sort of people who the contract's coming up in the future, they're just having a look. That type of behavior, partly because obviously your commute and that sort of stuff has gone, but also that type of thinking may have slightly changed. But also there's a marketing spend thing going on here. So we've talked to a few brands where marketing spend has been cut quite instantly and quite quickly. And obviously that's going to have an impact, a direct impact on the type of traffic coming through. But yeah, the fact that actually sales have gone up despite traffic coming down, these are two lines which you almost never see crossing over. So yeah, it is very interesting to see that happening out across the industry.
So what we did next was kind of break those unique visitors across by device. And what we saw was that initially, when people started to have restrictions placed on their lifestyle, we saw a real drop off in mobile traffic. But actually, in the last week or so, people seem to really have stabilized that. And now we're seeing quite a similar 15% decline from both mobile and desktop and tablet. And equally for sales, we're seeing quite an equal benefit across mobile and desktop and tablet, which I don't think we were really expecting when we first started to look into the data. So the final trend we want to share with you around the digital mix shift was around customers seeking out flexibility. So what we've seen is 33% increase in customers buying a SIM-only or bring your own device plan, whereas the more rigid kind of 1 or 2 year pay monthly contracts are seeing a small decline of 3%. And so just to summarize that section again, we're seeing fewer customers browsing on our websites. We're seeing a larger increase in sales though, and conversions really improving across most of the industry, and that we're seeing those remaining customers seeking out flexibility in what they're buying. Next, we're going to look at how customer needs are changing across the industry. So the first thing that we really took away was that people are asking for help more than ever. We've seen a 19% increase in users opening the Help Me Choose engine. And then beyond that, when they actually get into the engine, they're still asking for that additional help. So for example, we ask them how much data they need. We've seen an 11% increase in people asking, I'm not really that sure, can you help me here?
And this was fascinating for us, obviously. One of the key things we're looking for is sort of how relevant, I guess, the engine is at any given time. And we've certainly never seen a lift like this before, nearly 20% lift very, very quickly, and people looking for assistance. And obviously it's a combined thing going on. It's the fact that non-digital savvy, perhaps earlier stage in the buying cycle, customers are being forced online, and obviously those are the people that are looking for help. But actually it's the double whammy of then also having a limitation within the call center and chat centers, because what we're hearing is that there are volume challenges with people working from home on the call centers or in chat, and sometimes actually chat and call centers being shut down altogether. So it's kind of a double whammy effect going on. But this really sort of tells us, and is the beginning of the clues here around how brands need to work very, very hard online right now, because there are people really, really craving assistance and craving guidance.
What we've also found is that this sort of level of uncertainty, it's bringing a lot of existing customers back online, and they're seeking out that level of support before they log in and they're coming into the engine.
Yeah, and by the way, this one's really key. So first of all, just to explain this a bit. So it's not that we've gone 8% down on prospects. It's just relative change. So everything's actually gone up, but the relative change. So actually what we're seeing is the mix is changing. So the mix is going more to existing than it is to new. The whole thing is lifting. What's interesting about this is that we're seeing this real increase of these existing customers. And what's fascinating about that is that they're using the engine. So these are existing customers who are coming to a prospect page and they are clicking help me choose, which isn't really the wording actually that you'd expect, but they're so sort of looking for guidance in this moment. They're looking for reassurance, that they're going to the engine in the hope that it does something for them. And right now, across most of our brands, almost all the brands, it exits them out. You just get an exit screen. And what we're now looking to do to try and help a bit better is to build an existing customer triage solution into the engine. So basically, when you're an existing customer, rather than just bin you out, we actually say, okay, what are you looking to do today? Are you looking for some reassurance around our COVID connectivity? Are you looking to upgrade or whatever? And then at least we can send them either to the right page, because brands are spinning up these really helpful information pages right now. Or we could put them to the right place to log in, or we could send them to chat, but pass that information through to chat so they know who they are. So I just think we need to take a fresh look at existing customers. And as a brand, you need to sort of realize, I guess, and see that there's a big chunk of existing customers pre-login within the prospect flows who are looking for help more than ever. So getting information for existing customers into your upper funnel prospect pages is actually pretty key, because there's a lot of people there.
So then we started to try and dig into what we know about these customers that are coming onto the site. And one of the first things that we found was that these people are far more considered than they once were. They're potentially a little less digitally savvy. They might be people who once would have preferred to go into store. But what we're seeing is now 1 in 5 users is taking more than 4 minutes to complete the 15 gifts engine. And that's an increase of 8% versus last month.
Yeah, and that's and the digital stuff, and I guess one other point on that is that this could also be a reflection on the buying cycle, which is interesting, because the shops are closing, there'll be a group of customers who normally go in retail first, want to look at the product or whatever, and then go online to buy perhaps later in the buying cycle. And actually, if people are being put online, those people are being pushed online earlier, you're seeing naturally that more cautious, considered customer, because they are naturally earlier in their buying cycle. So seeing that and recognizing as a brand that that your customers are a lot more cautious, non-digital savvy, and perhaps earlier in their buying cycle is quite key.
And we're not just seeing that in how they get to their recommendation, we're also seeing that after their recommendation as well. So what we've seen is that now 28% of users are waiting more than a day to purchase a product after they get their recommendation. It's that real cautious consideration that's playing out that means that online has to work much harder for those less digitally savvy customers.
And it could be a nice thing to think about offers as well, and how offers play in today's climate. But what we're going to actually look at now is go beyond 24 hours. So we're going to see how this is sort of impacting day 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's so fascinating to see this caution and delay sort of playing out in such a significant way.
So then we started to drill into the individual needs, first looking at handsets. And the shifts are a little bit more subtle here, but it shows what people are using as decision drivers right now. And increasingly, they're wanting things like 5G in their phones to be able to stay connected. And luxuries like things like wireless charging have become a little less important to the customers.
And 5G is so interesting here. Like you say, 5G is this is the start of a thread or a theme you're going to see actually as we go through this. But while people and spending is obviously being restricted, caution is being applied, the purchases are being delayed, obviously. When it comes to the handset, and when it comes to plan, and when it comes to connectivity, actually people have never been more willing to spend. And if they're willing to take some risks right now, but actually being connected is not one of them. So you start to see things like 5G actually becoming quite an interesting topic of conversation.
For tariffs, we're seeing a lot more of a shift. So customers are telling us that they want to use their phone to stay connected with their loved ones, to stream data to other devices through mobile hotspotting, or using apps, and that includes communication apps, so things like WhatsApp or Zoom. But I think actually the needs that are becoming less important feel even more telling of the mindset of the customers that are on our websites at the moment. And that's because people are anticipating they're going to use their phone less for organising their life, streaming sport, and using maps. And in the current climate, that's kind of understandable. Your calendar's hardly full when you can't leave the house, and live sports mainly been cancelled. And if you're just staying in your local area, you don't really need a map. But that's a very short-term and immediate need, and that's what they're thinking about when they're making a purchase at the moment.
And this is a big takeaway, I think, for hopefully everyone who's on the call, and certainly was for us, which is that this is real proof that despite the fact they're buying a product which they're going to have for upwards of sort of 2, even 3 years, they are absolutely shopping in the now. So where people think about what matters, when people think about their decision drivers, they are absolutely unable to look past the current situation. And they're unable to take them into their decision making, even though you'd hope the vast majority of their contract will be in more normal times. So I think expecting customers to look past what's happening and see the other benefits that will obviously come back to life again is just not the case. They are absolutely making decisions based on right now, and messaging really has to reflect that.
So just to recap on those changing needs, customers are seeking out help, they're more cautious and they're more considered, and they're purchasing with immediate needs and wants in mind. Now we're going to look at how the customer buying patterns are changing. So the first thing that we saw was that we're seeing an increasing proportion of users buying into flagship phones. And by that, we mean anything in the iPhone 11 series or the Galaxy S20 series. And that's increasing, even though we've got so much financial uncertainty right now. And that's people prioritizing buying a phone that meets their needs rather than being particularly on budget.
Yeah, and this is that trend again of bucking any normal trend that most sites will be seeing right now. Whereas actually people are more willing than ever to spend on their phone, on their plan, because that's suddenly become an absolutely crucial thing.
And then we started to try and understand where that lift was coming from. And of course it's both, but the biggest lift's actually coming from within the engine, where we're finding that those people who are a bit unsure and are coming through the engine looking for help, they're buying into flagship phones when we might not have usually seen that sort of behavior.
Yeah, and we never actually. So I mean, this is fascinating for us because we know that flagships aren't what the engine is about. We tend to see that people that want flagship devices, as Emily said, they don't tend to use it. They tend to know what they want. They want the iPhone 11 or whatever it is. The engine tends to attract that more mid-range customer. However, yeah, exactly as Emily said, that is a really interesting thing, that even that group of customers, those sort of the people that may not have spent in that way before, are clearly unsure because they're assisted customers. These are the people who are saying, I want help, but actually they're going on to spend on these flagship devices.
Okay, so as we've already said, when we're asking customers how much data they need, we are seeing that increased proportion of people asking us for a little bit of help trying to decide. What we're also seeing is an increase in the number of people thinking that they're going to need unlimited data.
Yeah, and I guess this is the same thing again. That you're the risk of losing data at this point is quite key. So actually, when it feels like a time when really it's just about conversion and not really about value, actually, if the messaging is correct and supportive and right, people are really more willing to consider unlimited and plans where actually there isn't that fear of ever being cut than ever. So actually, again, sort of going back a few slides, thinking about people's thought processes around being connected, there is a really interesting trend there for brands that do have that unlimited option.
So what we then see is that majority of people who did say that they thought they wanted unlimited data or that they weren't really sure how much data they did need go on to purchase unlimited plans. So as Tom was saying, it's that kind of risk aversion, like I don't want to be stuck with no data, therefore I'd rather purchase unlimited plans.
Yeah, which has resulted in a 41% lift in unlimited plans, which is pretty huge, at a time when you wouldn't necessarily have thought that would happen. And yeah, as Emily said, you can see it quite clearly. Actually, not the most scientific thing to do to flip back and forward like that, but you can basically see that the low and medium, where they've asked for that, have largely gone on to buy it. The big shift is that help me decide columns jumping into the unlimited bar, and actually that's exactly what Emily said. We really see that people are coming in. They're saying they're not sure, they're using the data calculator, but actually more than not, they're going on to then choose the unlimited plan. So there's some sort of interesting opportunity there, an interesting opportunity to talk to customers in the right way.
So just to recap that final data section, customers are trading into more expensive unlimited data plans and more premium flagship products, just to ensure that those changing needs are definitely being met, a very risk-averse kind of behaviour.
Cool. So I'm just going to spend the last 5 minutes talking about some examples of how we can help. So we've obviously been spending time with different brands, the customer success team, trying to find out ways that we can help. And first of all, I just wanted to share some of the things we're hearing from you. So some of the common themes that are coming through in the conversations we're having. One is that you really recognize the changing digital mix. You understand that there is this sort of switch of sort of non-digital savvy customers coming online, but actually you want to support them, but it's quite hard to spin up new flows quickly, new flows, new journeys to cater for them. There's also a sense of pressure having to absorb retail sales. So I don't know how much, as you're listening to this, it resonates, but in some cases we've heard that targets aren't being cut at all. The message is, yes, retail shut, it will be picked up by online. And obviously within the digital teams, that's causing some element of pressure that feels like, okay, we really have to step up here. There's a big, there's a big weight here for us to absorb. Doubled with that, there's some concern around the impact of call and chat centers. So again, this really depends on the brand. Some of you will be running fine, others will be shut completely, and some will be running at limited capacity. But there's definitely real concern about the combination of that changing digital mix, the closing of the stores, and then having limitation when it comes to the online chat functions or call. And then finally, just the rapidness of everything. There's obviously this clear message that you want insight quickly. Things are changing very rapidly. You're open to more data than ever. So based on those, we've put together a few examples of ways that we're helping and started to help some of our partners, and ways that we'd love to talk to you about as well. So I'm just going to run through these. So the first one is really spinning up some journeys and experimenting in some journeys that really reflects the changing of behavior that we talked about earlier. So that could include, for example, bringing their current decision drivers into it. We said that people are making decisions based on the now, homeschooling, entertaining kids, working from home, video calling. So really reflecting that in the types of stuff talked about in the engine. We're going to be looking at having a lot more use of sub-copy and descriptive copy to handhold people, where actually before we may have thought this is pretty self-explanatory. We're going to really handhold through every single question interaction, so that we sort of address this, the fact that people are taking slower time. They're taking a slower time because they clearly want to make the right choice. So if they're doing that, we should be supporting them with copy that does that. And then finally, we're going to look at actually having perhaps a journey around who you're buying for. So trying to explore whether actually people are buying not for themselves right now, but actually for a parent or dependent or child. So a few ways that we can start to try and spin up and experiment these journeys to cater for the changing customer. We also heard earlier that people are looking for assistance more than ever, and actually it's harder to come by more than ever. So what we're going to be doing is putting launch pads across the site to make sure that there is assistance offered to customers who need it. And actually we're going to be looking at the messaging of those. So really doubling down on this idea of needing a helping hand, really hand holding, but also starting to bring some of that messaging forward around staying connected. Stay connected, find the best phone plan to help you keep in touch. So just make sure that the right messaging is there and that help is offered across the site, so that all of those that need it can see it. We're also looking at how we can help ease the pressure on chat. So this is totally, of course, dependent on the current situation with the brand and what's happening with their chat teams. Some will be absolutely fine. But what we want to do is give the option of a chat agent being able to call, to be able to send a customer into the engine. So if they're very busy, if a customer is early in their buying cycle, it will be totally at the agent's discretion, but they could choose to say, actually, why don't you use this help me choose tool? It will really help you talk to you about the phones and the plans. Then come back to me if you want to chat. And just giving chat that extra tool to be able to use should they come to a busy period, or should they be able to use it for those early stage buying cycle customers. Like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at helping with the existing customer problem as well. So we're seeing that there's this big increase in existing customers within the prospect flows looking for help. Perhaps they're not people that normally come in to log in, hence why they're in the prospect flow. They're looking for guidance, they're looking for assurance. What we're looking to do is spin up some pretty simple triage capability that just asks them, like I say, what they're looking for, and then rather than just binning them out, gives them, either sends them to the right place or gives them a bit more information, or indeed sends them into chat, actually, if that's the right thing to do. And then finally, the profile itself, the data, where this information you've heard today is coming from. So obviously, every time someone uses the engine, we collect what we call a traits profile about them. But ultimately, we can know what their decision drivers are, what they're most likely to buy. We can start to see whether they're cautious or impulsive based on how long they're spending. So quite an interesting sort of psychological trait in there. And basically, we can provide these profiles out to you actually in real time now as well. And there are sort of three main use cases that we're talking to customers about right now. One is so that you can monitor the changing needs of these customers quickly. We want to be able to provide that. We're going to be doing more insight like this, but we really want you to be able to have that. We also want to be able to drive personalization. So as marketing spend sort of decreases, you want to be able to make the most of the people that do land. And part of that is personalization through Adobe Audience Manager, whatever the tool you use. So just being able to pump these profiles in and making sure that they're being used to personalize and make sure the site is highly relevant is important. And then lastly, chat, just making sure that we're doing the best we possibly can for chat, particularly if they're under strain. So sending these profiles through to chat agents so that should they then be called upon, they at least know everything about the customer. So yeah, that's just some ideas. And as I say, the team will be talking to you. We're out of time. It was a sort of quick run through. Hopefully it was useful. We are actually going to be sending bespoke decks to each of you that really focus in on your particular brand to show you what's happening within your brand so you can compare. So they'll be going out actually today, those bespoke insight decks. If you do have a QBR coming up in the next week or two, that it might be that they're done in the QBR, but otherwise you'll be getting them today or tomorrow. And then we'll be following up as a team as well to see which of these ideas we can do to help, or anything else we can do to help over the months ahead. But in the meantime, as I say, thank you for joining us, and hopefully that was useful, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.